Imagine you've just taken over a massive organization. You're the new leader, but the old boss's loyalists are still in the building.
Oh, yeah.
And they're actively leaking fabricated stories to completely destroy your reputation. What is your next move there? Do you go on the attack? Do you clean house?
Many people would, yeah.
Right. Because 3,000 years ago, a king faced this exact crisis. And his strategy was completely counterintuitive. He publicly invited a literal curse upon himself.
It is certainly not the standard crisis management playbook.
No, definitely not. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to our latest deep dive into our sources. Today, we are looking at a fantastic article from Room Apologetics by Mark Bates. It's titled Psalm 7, an exegetical and biblical theological commentary. And our mission today is to dig past the sort of religious veneer of this text and extract the intense ancient political drama, the slander, and the tribal conflict that's hidden right below the surface. We're going to uncover how a 3,000-year-old document handles false accusations, political rivalry, and the pursuit of justice.
Yeah, and to do that properly, we really have to completely change our mental image of what a psalm actually is. The default picture for most people is, someone sitting on a peaceful hillside,
right,
playing a harp and offering up these ethereal private prayers.
It's like very clean, quiet spirituality. It feels very detached from the messy realities of the world.
Exactly. We have to throw that image completely out the window for this text. Psalm 7 was born out of a fierce, high-stakes political dispute. The text itself actually has a superscription, a little introductory note at the very beginning that categorizes it as a Shigayon.
I have to admit, Shigayon sounds fantastic, but I have absolutely no idea what it actually means.
You aren't alone in that, I promise. It's a literary term with a fairly uncertain technical meaning among scholars today. The Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, generally just calls it a psalm or a song. But the really important part of that superscription isn't the musical term. It's who the song is addressed concerning. It specifically mentions Cush, a Benjaminite.
Oh, okay. That tiny detail feels like a massive red flag. Cush a Benjaminite, because that brings us right into the acute political and tribal tensions between the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. Can you walk us through the actual mechanics of that tension? Like, why did these two tribes have such immense friction at this specific moment in history?
Sure, yeah. Think of ancient Israel at this time as a very fragile coalition of tribes rather than a unified modern nation state. King Saul, the first king of Israel, was from the tribe of Benjamin. So for decades, the Benjaminites held the power, the influence, all the royal appointments. They were the ultimate insiders.
They were running the show.
Right. But Saul's reign ends disastrously, and David, who is from the tribe of Judah, takes the throne.
So almost overnight, the Benjaminites go from being the ruling class to being complete outsiders, while the tribe of Judah suddenly holds all the cards. That is a recipe for deep, deep resentment.
It really is. It is a textbook hostile administration change.
Yeah.
The old regime, Saul's loyalists are watching your status completely evaporate. And they don't just sit back and accept it. They start aggressively working to undermine David's legitimacy. What's fascinating here is that we often read Psalm 7 as a standard lament, just a private spiritual complaint. But in reality, this is a public political defense by a newly crowned king who is facing severe coordinated reputational attacks.
They are essentially running a massive smear campaign. Our sources note he's being accused of very specific things like betraying an ally or plundering an adversary without cause. This isn't just, David is a bad guy. It's David committed treason.
Yeah, exactly. And in the ancient Near East, honor and reputation were the absolute currency of power. If David is seen as a corrupt, treacherous leader who abuses his authority, his fragile coalition will just shatter. The Benjaminites were hitting him where it hurt the most. They were trying to ignite a civil war through character assassination.
Wow.
Some scholars suggest these adversaries are court loyalists of the former king, while others think they might be instigators from a later event like Absalom's Rebellion.
Oh, wait, let's pause there for a second. Absalom's Rebellion, that was when David's own son tried to orchestrate a coup, right? The sources mention this as a possible backdrop.
That's the one, yeah. Absalom actively campaigned to steal the hearts of the people of Israel away from his father, spreading rumors that David was an unjust judge who didn't care about the people's grievances.
Oh, wow.
So whether Psalm 7 is reacting to Saul's loyalists early on or the opposition research being leaked during Absalom's attempted coup, the mechanism of the threat is the exact same. It's a calculated attempt to destroy a leader's credibility.
Which puts David in an incredibly dangerous position. The source points out this vivid imagery he uses. He describes his pursuers as threatening to tear his soul like a lion with no deliverer present. When someone is systematically destroying your reputation and you have zero way to stop the rumors, it really does feel like being hunted by a predator.
Yeah, the feeling of helplessness is key to understanding his next move. Because David is the king, but he lacks any human legal recourse to clear his name in this specific situation.
Why is that?
Well, the human courts, the tribal elders, they are all completely compromised by these deep-seated tribal loyalties.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If he goes to a judge from Judah, everyone says, well, the verdict is rigged in his favor.
Right.
If he goes to a judge from Benjamin, he gets convicted of crimes he didn't commit out of spite. He can't just go to human resources and file a grievance here.
Exactly. His only option is a completely different kind of defense strategy. He submits to a formal oath of innocence. The commentary notes this is similar to legal oaths you see in Job 31 or Psalms 17 and 26. He places a conditional threefold self-imprecation on himself.
Okay, conditional threefold self-imprecation, we're definitely going to need a translation for that one.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah.
So imprecation basically means a curse. David is publicly declaring, if I actually did commit these crimes, if I betrayed an ally or plundered without cause, then let three things happen to me. First, may the enemy pursue me. Second, may they overtake and trample my life to the ground. And third, may they lay my honor in the dust.
He is quite literally asking to be destroyed if he is lying.
Yes.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. I have to push back on this strategy a bit. Why would a powerful king, the guy with the standing army and the crown, invite such brutal self-sabotage? I mean, he technically has the military power to just arrest Cush the Benjaminite and silence his critics. Why play this incredibly high-stakes game with a self-inflicted curse?
Well, using the army would only prove the Benjamites' point.
Oh.
It would completely validate their accusation that he is a tyrant who abuses his power to crush dissent. By taking this oath, David is making a brilliant strategic move in a theological sense. This oath functions as a complete surrender to divine jurisdiction.
So he's essentially taking the case out of the corrupted human political arena and dropping it squarely in the lap of the divine courtroom. He's saying, I'm not going to fight you in the mud. I'm taking this to the Supreme Court of the universe.
That is a great way to look at it, yeah. Because the human courts are tainted by the intense Judah versus Benjamin conflict. Any ruling they make would be seen as illegitimate. So David instead appeals directly to Yahweh's covenantal commitment.
Right.
Going back to the promises made in 2 Samuel 7, God committed to uphold the Davidic line. David is leaning on that promise, demanding that Yahweh act as the ultimate judge of the peoples.
It's a very formal legal-style denial of the charges, then.
It is, and the commentary makes a crucial clarification here. This isn't a claim of absolute perfect sinlessness on David's part. He's not arguing, I have never made a moral mistake in my entire life.
Right.
He is making a highly specific legal denial of false charges leveled against his political integrity. He is innocent of the treason the Benjaminites are claiming.
So once he makes that appeal, once he fully surrenders his defense to the higher court, the entire tone of the text seems to shift completely.
It shifts dramatically, yeah. He moves away from the desperate first-person plea for his own life. The text transitions into what scholars call a third-person wisdom discourse.
Meaning, he steps back, puts on his philosopher hat, and starts explaining to the audience how the universe actually works. Having handed the gavel over to God, he basically says, let me tell you the actual mechanics of political evil.
Exactly. The poetic devices he uses to explain those mechanics are incredible.
Yeah.
Our source highlights two in particular that illustrate the self-destruction of evil. The first one is the birth parody in verse 14.
Oh, I found this one fascinating. He portrays evil through a mock childbirth. He says, the wicked conceive trouble, they travail with iniquity, and they give birth to disillusionment.
Yeah, it is a profound psychological insight into the nature of malice. The whole process of plotting slander and trying to destroy someone is exhausting. It is painful like labor, and the end result doesn't even bring the satisfaction the evildoer was hoping for. It just brings utter emptiness.
I think anyone who has spent hours drafting an angry response on social media or plotting how to get back at a rival at work only to feel completely hollow afterward knows exactly what that disillusionment feels like. All that effort to tear someone else down and you just end up holding a bundle of nothing.
The emptiness is built into the design of vengeance. But the second metaphor David uses is even more visceral. The commentary calls it the hunting pit and boomerang. The text describes evildoers spending all this time meticulously digging a pit to trap someone else, only to instantly fall into it themselves.
This immediately made me think of classic cartoon physics.
Oh, yeah.
Like Wile E. Coyote setting up this incredibly elaborate anvil trap to crush the Roadrunner. He pulls the rope, the mechanism swings around, and the anvil drops right on his own head.
That's perfect.
It is that exact same energy. The evil you orchestrate inevitably circles back and flattens you.
Well, it is a humorous visual. It captures the absolute seriousness of the text's message perfectly. David is asserting a fundamental natural law of the universe. Slander and violence are inherently self-destructive forces. Evil contains the literal seeds of its own destruction. The violence returns directly upon the perpetrator's head.
Which reframes how we view divine justice entirely. The source points out that God is a righteous judge who expresses indignation daily. If the wicked do not repent, God is actively sharpening his sword and bending his bow. But the mechanism of justice isn't always lightning striking from the sky.
No. Oftentimes, it is just God allowing the trap to function as designed.
Wow.
The pit you dig for someone else becomes your own grave. The slander you speak destroys your own credibility.
But this raises a massive question for me. If David's strategy of non-retaliation worked for him, did it set a precedent? Like, did this become the blueprint for how future leaders were expected to handle slander in this tradition?
It absolutely did. The author of the commentary, Mark Bates, points out that this historical squabble between Judah and Benjamin establishes a theological pattern that echoes through history. Theologians call this promise plan theology. Think of it like a fractal.
A fractal, like the mathematical pattern that repeats itself at every scale.
Exactly that. The pattern starts relatively small here, with David, the innocent anointed king, facing false accusations and entrusting his defense to God. But that same pattern ripples out and repeats on a massive cosmic scale later in history. David's personal vindication is organically connected to the final establishment of God's kingdom.
Because his character has to reflect the righteousness of the God he represents.
Right, which points forward directly to the New Testament and Jesus the Messiah, the ultimate son of David. If you look at the historical accounts of Jesus, he faced an even more intense version of what David experienced. Massive slander, coordinated false accusations, and a literal political show trial.
And he handled it using the exact same blueprint. He faced all of it without sin and without retaliating. Did the early church writers pick up on this connection?
Oh, definitely. They relied heavily on this text to explain not just what happened to Jesus, but how early Christians should behave when they were being slandered. For example, the Apostle Paul, writing in Romans 12:19, tells believers never to avenge themselves, but to leave room for the wrath of God. He is telling a community facing severe rumors and political pressure to echo David's refusal to take personal vengeance.
And Peter does the same thing, right? In 1 Peter 2, he's addressing Christians who are being falsely accused as evildoers. He presents Jesus as the ultimate example, the servant who, when he was reviled, didn't utter threats or strike back. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judges righteously.
It is the exact same posture David took with his Oath of Innocence. We also see this pattern in the Gospel of John and the book of Acts, where the experience of the Davidic king being hated without cause is treated as a direct prophetic template for the betrayal and trial of Jesus.
And the source highlights a fascinating detail all the way at the end of the New Testament in Revelation 2.23.
Yes, the specific claim from Psalm 7 that God tests the minds and hearts is applied directly to the exalted Christ in Revelation.
Which brings that whole divine courtroom imagery completely full circle. Jesus doesn't just model the innocent sufferer. He ultimately sits in the very judge's seat that David was appealing to in the first place.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, God's public vindication of the Messiah through the resurrection is the ultimate proof of the self-destructive futility of evil we discussed earlier. The cross looked like the ultimate victory for the slanderers.
Right.
It looked like the ultimate pit dug for the innocent.
The ultimate Wile E. Coyote anvil dropping.
Exactly. But the resurrection flipped it. It proved that human justice is ultimately grounded in divine holiness and that evil defeats itself.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from a 3,000-year-old tribal conflict over administration changes in ancient Israel into a divine courtroom, through cartoon anvils, all the way to the New Testament's blueprint for facing persecution. How does this actually connect to someone listening to this deep dive right now? I think it offers a masterclass in dealing with our current culture of information overload and reputational attacks.
We certainly live in a society where tribal tensions and political slander are as intense as ever. The platforms have changed, sure, but the human impulse to run a smear campaign hasn't.
When you are misunderstood, or worse, when someone is actively lying about you to ruin your reputation when those lions are tearing at your soul, the immediate overwhelming instinct is to fight back, to dig a pit of your own,
Right.
to start a counter-smear campaign on social media or in the office. But this ancient text is offering a radically different strategy. It's saying there is profound, tangible power in choosing non-retaliation.
It requires a tremendous amount of trust. You have to believe that the human court of public opinion isn't the final word. You have to surrender your defense to a higher jurisdiction, trusting the truth eventually outlasts the lions.
It's about releasing the absolute, exhausting need for personal vengeance. Which brings us to the end of our journey today. We've traced the Benjaminite political slander, explored the extremity of the Oath of Innocence, unpacked the mechanics of the Boomerang Effect, and seen how this ancient pattern found its ultimate fulfillment centuries later.
It's a remarkable progression, really, from a local historical crisis to a universal truth about how justice operates.
And I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to mull over. We talked about how the text describes evil as a birth parody, where people put in all this grueling effort to destroy someone only to give birth to disillusionment. And we talked about how evil always eventually falls into its own pit. If that is actually a fundamental law of the universe, how much of our modern anxiety about our political rivals or personal enemies could be completely cured simply by stepping back, dropping the rope, and letting the boomerang do its work?
A question definitely worth sitting with.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into our sources. We can't wait to unpack the next one with you.